Exodus chapter 31, as you are opening up there, it's got two main divisions. We have the calling of the artists, and then the keeping of the Sabbaths. Keep that hand raised if you need a Bible. We've got some coming around. Exodus chapter 31, calling of the artists and the keeping of the Sabbaths. Verses 1 through 11 is all about the calling of the artists. It says in verse 1, "Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying." Now, where we're at here real quickly is that the meeting between God and Moses on Mount Sinai, where the Ten Commandments and all the different instructions and all of those things came from, is drawing to an end. And so God is giving these, he gives these last couple of instructions, these two main divisions. He calls the artists to do what it is that, to carry out the instructions, the directions that he's given to Moses. And then he's also concerned that the people keep the Sabbath. So we'll find out what that's all about. But it is the Lord speaking to Moses. Okay? And it says in verse 2, "See, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah." He goes on to say in verse 3, "And I have filled him with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship, to design artistic works, to work in gold, in silver, in bronze, in cutting jewels for setting, in carving wood, and to work in all manner of workmanship." Now we'll pick it up back there in just a few minutes, but we have here an extremely interesting portion as we start out this chapter, something that we do not often hear about as far as our studies in the Old Testament, unless you're in here. We come to it every so often. But it's something that we might come to more often when we're studying the New Testament, and that is the calling of someone and the equipping or the filling of the Spirit that God performs in certain individuals that he is calling to do, is calling to serve him in specific ways. We'll talk about that some more in case that's a little bit confusing, but let's make a couple of things clear. Number one, in verse 2, we find out that it is God, and God says that himself. He says, "I have called." Now at this point, he's given instructions. We've just finished. He's just given instructions for the tabernacle, the tent of meeting. And there's lots of things to construct. Everything that has to do, that pertains to the tent of meeting, but also even the furniture that goes inside and outside of the tent of meeting. Also the clothing, the hats, everything that has to do with the priests, what the priests would wear while they're serving in that tabernacle. And he says here in verse 2 is, "I have called by name." So it's interesting that God knew Bezalel. Okay? Now, it goes on to tell us also down in verse 6, "And indeed I have appointed with him Aholiab." Now, it said he calls them by name. What is strange for you and I is we have never heard of these people before in our lives. In fact, even as we've gone through Genesis and Exodus, some of you have been here for all of this. We've never heard of Bezalel, and we've never heard of Aholiab. And yet God knew them personally. He knew their names. He knew exactly who they were. He knew what it was that they could accomplish. How did he know that? Well, number one, because he created these people. But also, he tells us in verse 3 that I have filled. So we learn two things here about what God's doing in these two individuals' lives. Number one, he calls them. And then number two, what he's revealing to them is he's equipped them for this specific task. What is the task? Verse 3, "I have filled them with the Spirit of God in wisdom, in understanding, in knowledge, and in all manner of workmanship." Here it is. He gets specific. "To design artistic works, to work in gold, in silver, in bronze, in cutting jewels for setting, in carving wood, and in working in all manner of workmanship." Now again, this is not something that we often discuss or talk about. In the church, in a church setting like this, what is often believed is that God's calling is for the pastor, the individual who's teaching, and then those who are leading worship, And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all that God calls people to do. And there may be many of us who do not teach and we do not lead worship, who may feel like, well, we're kind of like second class, like that's, I'm not really called to do anything. I mean, those are the two things that people get called to do, so I must not be called to do anything. And yet we find here that that thought, that understanding, that belief is far from the truth. In fact, we find here that there are certain individuals that God has gifted in a special way. I read those to you again. Design artistic works, to work in gold, in silver, in bronze, and cutting jewels for setting, and carving wood, and working in all manner of workmanship. These were individuals that were gifted in those specific areas. And they had nothing to do with the priesthood, other than if these individuals are not there to perform this workmanship, the priests are serving in their own plain clothes, or they're serving with no clothes or something. These individuals were the ones that were gifted to make the clothing. If they've got the clothing, but there's no one to construct the tabernacle, to weave the curtains, to put together all of the framing of it, to cast the bronze laver and the altar and the Holy of Holies and the Ark of the Covenant and all those different areas. If there's no one to do that, then the priests are dressed really, really nice, but they've got nothing to do and nowhere to do it in. So these individuals are gifted in this area, and because of them, because they have the ability to do these things, to build and to perform these tasks, because of them, these plans, these blueprints that God is giving to Moses become reality. Without these individuals, it's not happening. So these individuals, who are these people again? Bezalel and Aholiab. We may not know them, and to us they may have seemed up to this point, because we didn't know them, it's like, well, I don't know who they are, so they don't matter. But now we find that they play an extremely important role for this task. These people are necessary. They are needed. And it may be that you are thinking to yourself, well, I'm not called to teach the Bible. I'm not called to lead worship. Therefore, I must not really have an important job. I may be able to help out little bits here and there, but I guess it's not really that important. And yet we find it is extremely important. And the other interesting thing is that we find out that there are people that are gifted for other things. Some of you can bake. How many of you can bake? How many of you can bake things? Yes. That may, in fact, you may in fact be gifted that way. I can squeeze out some cupcakes, probably, as long as I had a box of Pillsbury or whatever, I don't even know who makes cupcakes, but as long as I had a box and I could follow instructions, okay, 1 egg and this much powder and whatever else, I might be able to do that. But some of you can whip that stuff out. Some of you are thinking, a box? Get behind me, Satan. Never use a box. But some of you may be gifted that way. I am not. I'm not gifted that way. Some of you may be musicians. Stringed instruments? Anybody? Stringed instruments? Yes. How about wind instruments? Any wind instruments? Yes. Brass? I'm not gifted that way. I tried years past when I was little. Took the flute in elementary school, music classes. Or maybe it's the other way. I don't know. I don't remember. But I was not gifted that way. Took the accordion. You know what the accordion is? Yes? My Mexican roots. Okay? I lasted a day. Guitar for a little while when my kids were little. Played guitar for a little while, but I never could get past the A, C, G, or B, D, or whatever it is. I don't know. I couldn't get very far. I was not gifted that way. And yet some of you are able to do those things, perform those things very easily. It comes somewhat natural to you. And all of us, even regardless of whatever way we're gifted, we still need to practice that task. 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 but you're gifted that way. For some of us, no matter how much we may practice something, we're just never going to be that good at it because we are not gifted with that. What about athletics? Probably a bunch of athletes in here. Some of you are very good at athletics. Yes? Any athletes in here? Yeah, got some athletes in here. That may, in fact, you may be gifted that way. Eric Liddell. Anybody ever heard of Eric Liddell? Anybody? Anybody ever heard of Eric Liddell? Yes? No? Oh, man. Anybody know what that is? Yeah. What is it? Yeah. Right, yeah. As like Josie said.
Chariots of fire.
Chariots of fire. The runner. The former Olympian who was going to run, he was a runner, was going to run the 100 until he found out that they were going to be running on Sunday. And he said, I'm a Christian, I'm not doing it on Sunday. So he switched races so that he could run on Saturday. He was an Olympic runner and then later on a missionary. In fact, he said this. He said, I believe God made me for a purpose, but he also made me fast. And when I run, I feel his pleasure. I used to run. I never felt his pleasure. In fact, it had nothing to do with pleasure. I really, really like bicycles. I've got a bicycle that I try to ride a few times a week. I enjoy it thoroughly, but I do not sense the pleasure of God when I do that. It's fun. I love it. I enjoy it. But that's not what I've been called or gifted to do. The point is that the teaching of the Bible, the leading of worship, those are not the only things that God gifts people at. It may be any number of things. And here we find that these individuals were specifically filled with the Spirit of God in wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, and all manner of workmanship to make things. That's another one. I am not gifted in that area. I can fix things around the house and kind of come up with some little, like what we call Mickey Mouse. Everybody knows that term, Mickey Mouse. I can Mickey Mouse things. But I certainly am no craftsman. And even when I do make things, it takes me like forever, like for months sometimes, to fix something or do something. It's just I'm not gifted that way. There are things that I can figure out and do and work and okay, but it's never the work of a workman, of an artist. And yet these individuals were gifted that way, and the church needs all the different types of individuals. I've said this so many times before. You ought to be so very, very thankful for our worship leaders. I know it's hard sometimes Sunday morning. I was up late last night watching scary movies or YouTube or whatever, and man, I just feel so tired. I don't know. I don't really feel like worshiping. But imagine if Pastor Chris was leading worship. Come on. You'd be like, I'll just get there late. Show up after worship. So we ought to be thankful for our worship leaders who can actually play an instrument and sing at the same time. Some of us have a hard time chewing gum and walking at the same time. Some of us have a hard time throwing a baseball. Like I got to step and then, or what am I doing here? It's like, I can't figure out. Some of us are not coordinated that way, and yet we have individuals here that are. They're gifted that way, and we ought to be thankful for them. It may not be in a church setting. Listen, Fusion. Some of you belong to a sports team. They're not going to listen to Pastor Chris. They're not here. And you certainly can't take me with you to go talk to your team. So who's going to do it? The missionary on the team. You. You're like, what? Me? A lady one time says, listen, my friend's son is in the hospital. And I just want you to go talk to him, and I just need for you to go explain the gospel to him. And I listened to her whole spiel, and I said, I said, why don't you go talk to him? She said, me? I said, why not? I do not know him. Why in the world would he listen to me? You know his dad, you know him, you know the gospel. What's stopping you? She said, I'm going to have to pray about that. What's there to pray about? You're a missionary. You come in here and you learn, and then you go out there and you tell, you share. See how that works? So you may not be gifted to stand up here and share God's word. Maybe you are, but maybe you're not. But you may have that platform where you can go out there. And maybe it's a team. Maybe it's your band. Maybe it's your class. Maybe it's your whatever it is. I don't know. Your knitting circle. I don't know what you belong to. But wherever it is, you can be a blessing to them. That may be your platform. Now, what's missing from here, and it is not expressly said here, but once I say it, you'll go, oh yeah, I didn't really think about that. We have the calling from God. We know that the calling comes from God. These guys didn't choose to do it on their own. They didn't apply. God called them by name. And then he explains to Moses, I've equipped them specifically for that. What we do not get when it comes to the calling of God and God's equipping, and in fact, I need to say this, that whenever God calls an individual, he equips that individual for that specific task. Sometimes we're afraid, like, well, I don't want God to call me because I don't know if I'm ready. Guess what? You ain't ready. But God is. And God equips you for the time. So you don't have to worry about that. God's got you covered. If he's calling you, if he's guiding, then he is providing. Okay? He'll perform it through you. But here's what's not mentioned here, and that is, this is the killer. This is the killer in all of this. It's God's timing. Oh, that's the hard part. Let me ask you something. There are two individuals in question right now, Bezalel and Aholiab. Bezalel and Aholiab. How old were these individuals? Does anybody know? Of course we don't. Doesn't say. We assume that they were adults. We assume. They could have been any age. We don't know anything about them prior to this. What were they doing before God called them to do this? Does anybody know? Anybody know what they were doing? Yes.
The task that was preparing you for this one.
Probably. That's a fantastic guess. Yes. And just in case you didn't hear, he said a task that was preparing them for this calling. No doubt these individuals knew prior to this, they knew how to construct things. They knew how to design artistic works, to work in gold, in silver, in bronze. They knew how to cut jewels for setting. They knew how to carve wood. And to work in all manner of workmanship. You ever come across somebody like that? Like, man, they're just, construction-wise, they just can figure out anything. They can do anything. Anybody know anybody like that? Yeah. Don't you hate those people? I do. I'm just kidding. I don't really hate them, but, you know, it's like, man, how in the world did you figure that out? And they're just like, well, I just, I just did it. I don't know. But they would also look at me and go, oh, my goodness, how do you get up there and teach in front of people? I don't know. I just do it. God calls, God equips, but it's always in God's timing. I share that with you because I know that there are many of us in here. I've talked to many of you have talked to me about, hey, what is God calling me to do? And I don't know exactly what God may be calling you specifically to do. No doubt he has some task, some calling for you. What is it? I do not know. So what should you do in the meantime? You should remain faithful in whatever it is that you are doing. In obedience to God, let me do my best to be obedient to him. To read my Bible, to pray, to worship, to be obedient to my parents, to bless other people, even my siblings. What is it that you do? Do you play an instrument? Do you sing? Do you play some sport? Are you a good a student, excellent student? Continue to do those things and do them to the best of your ability. Because you and I do not know when God will say, okay, it's time. You're on. This is what I want you to do. I did my best before I started ever working with students to just be a blessing to other people. I would show up on church work days, clean toilets, paint the bathroom stalls, take out the trash, sweep, whatever it was. I'm just happy doing that. I don't even want to do anything else. Had no desire to teach, Had no desire to talk to anybody else about anything. It's just I just want to show up and just do some work, and that's fine with me. I did that to the best of my ability. So you want to do that to the best of your ability. Go back with me to Genesis chapter 12. Use those Bibles. Come on. Genesis chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12. There's a wonderful story there about God calling Abram. If you are in Exodus, you want to go back one book toward the beginning of the Bible and find Genesis and then go to chapter 12. Genesis chapter 12. It's before Exodus, the book that we are in. Genesis chapter 12. Let's see if I can find it. Genesis chapter 12. It says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land," God says, "that I will show you." Okay? I want you to leave everything that you know, and you're going to follow me to a land, and I'm not even going to tell you what land it is yet. You just come with me. I'll show you the land. I'm going to take you there. I will make you a great nation. I will bless you and make your name great, and you shall be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse him who curses you, and in you all the families of the earth shall be blessed. So Abram departed. Abram actually went for it. He goes, I don't know you, God, but you're speaking to me now, and you want me to leave everything I know and go to a land, but you're not even telling me the land, so I don't know where I'm going, but I'm just supposed to follow you? Okay, I'll go. Some of you are wild like that. Just like, you don't know where we're going, how long we're going to be gone, how long is it going to take, what do I need? You don't know anything? Okay, I'll go with you. That was Abram. He had that spirit where he's just like, okay, I'll follow you, God, and he did. Do you know, God spoke to Abram, chapter 12. Chapter 11, the previous chapter, is the first time that we hear about Abram and Sarai. What do we know about them? Only this. We find out about their family, who their family was, and we find out that Sarai is barren. She cannot have kids. That's it. Then we get to chapter 12, and boom, God decides at that moment, okay, I'm gonna use this individual. Go back to Exodus, and let's go to Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. Excellent story there, one that many of us are familiar with. Exodus chapter 3. So if you were in Genesis, Exodus is the next book over, chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3. Exodus chapter 3 says, "Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. So he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. Then Moses said, I will now turn aside and see this great sight, why the bush does not burn. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses, this bush has got a flame in the middle of it. Moses walks up. He doesn't see anybody. He does not see God. He sees this bush, looks like it's burning, except it's not burning. And then check this out. The bush goes, hey, Moses, Moses, Moshe, Moshe. What would you do? I would have ran so fast. Moses says, yes. He actually answered the bush. God calling to Moses. What was Moses doing out there? Did anybody catch that? Verse 1. What does it say he was doing out there? Noah. Tending the flock. It was his own flock, correct? No. Whose flock was it? His father-in-law's flock. This man, Moses, did not even have his own flock. Sad. Sad. It's not his flock. But you want to know something about Moses? Moses is out there, verse 1, tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law. It does not say that he was beating the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, or that he just caged them all up and I'll come back for you in a week, or he left them out there alone. He was tending the flock, caring for them, being Faithful with whatever he was doing in that moment. And in that moment, God decides to come and call Moses. God calls. God then goes on. We won't read it, but then God goes on. Some of you know the story. He tries to explain to Moses, no. I've equipped you. You can do this. Si se puede. And Moses goes, no, I can't talk. He says, no, you can talk. I made man's mouth. You can talk. No, I can't. All right, I'm going to send your brother with you. But God sends him. God tries to explain to him, no, I'm calling you, and I've also equipped you. What we don't get in this story expressly, but it'll make sense in just a moment here, is we don't get the timing. Why at that moment? Why at that time? We don't know. It's just the time that God had appointed. But Moses, in the meantime, was faithful with what he was doing. Do you want to serve God in some calling, some higher calling, some ultimate calling? God, what do you want me to do with the days of my life that I have left? How do you want me to serve you? What's my place in your plan? I do not know that. I do not know. God knows. And when God is ready, he will tap you and say, okay, now is the time. But do you want to find yourself there? Then what you should do is make a practice of faithfulness in your daily life, in the mundane things that we do, in the daily things that we do that you feel like, this is so boring. Like practicing your artistry, your sport, your instrument, your whatever it is that you do. Athletics, art, studies, whatever it might be. You do that to the best of your ability. And you do your best to use all of those areas for the glory of God. That becomes your platform. When someone says, oh man, that is so cool that you are valedictorian. Wow, that is incredible. You say, yeah, thank God. Man, he got me through all these years. When someone says, oh man, the way that you sank that 3-pointer, or the way that you ran that touchdown in, or man, that race that you did, you performed so well, or you the way that you play play that instrument is so incredible. You say, yeah, Psalm 139 says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made. God made me. He gifted me to do that. And that then becomes your platform, your stage, where you get the chance to take what you're hearing in here. You become a missionary out to the world, to your team, to your coach, to your class, to your teacher, to your teammates, whatever it is. You're gifted in different ways. God knows what that is, and he will tap you when he's ready and say, okay, here's what I want you to do. Until that time, until that becomes clear, until you know, this is what God has called me to do. What you do is you stay faithful in the little things, the mundane things, the daily things. I'm going to be obedient to God. I'm going to be obedient to my parents. I'm going to be a blessing to the people around me. You do those things. And like Noah said, you're working at some task that God is using to prepare you for something else. For something else. So in Exodus chapter 31, see, I have called by name Bezalel, the son of Uri, the son of Hur, the tribe of Judah. Quietly, he probably for many years, I imagine, had just worked at his trade, whether it was gold or silver or bronze or all of those things, cutting jewels, carving wood, whatever it might have been. As a craftsman, just quietly did his work until one day God says, okay, I'm going to use you, and what you do, I'm going to use that to construct a tabernacle. Can you imagine? All these years you've been making mirrors, or you've been making jewelry, or you've been constructing whatever it is you've been making, but now I want you to make me a house that I will meet my people in. Come on. And in verse 3, I have filled him with the Spirit of God. God calls, God equips. in wisdom and understanding and knowledge and in all manner of workmanship, to design artistic works, to work in gold and silver and bronze, and cutting jewels for setting, and carving wood, and to work in all manner of workmanship. And I have appointed with him Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan. And I have put wisdom in the hearts of all the gifted artisans, that they may make all that I have commanded you. The tabernacle of meeting, the ark of the testimony, the mercy seat that is on it, and all the furniture of the tabernacle, the table and its utensils, the pure gold lampstand with all its utensils, the altar of incense, the altar of burnt offering with all its utensils, and the laver and its base, the garments of ministry, the holy garments for Aaron the priest, and the garments of his sons to minister as priests, and the anointing oil and sweet incense for the holy place, according to all that I have commanded you, they shall do. You do not have to turn there. I will read it for you because it's one verse. But as Paul was writing to Timothy at the close of his life, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 9, speaking about God, he says, God who has saved us and called us with a holy calling, not according to our works, I mean our purpose. It's not according to what we want to do or what we feel like, well, God, this is what I'm going to do. But it says not according to our works, but according to his own purpose. He will do it, he'll call you, and he'll do it in his own time. But he doesn't stop there, but according to his own purpose and grace. In other words, it's a holy calling according to God's purpose and grace. God's grace. It's God who calls us, gifts us, is gracious toward us, but also gives us the grace and the abilities that we have. He gives us that way. That's his grace that does that. If you can play an instrument, you can play a sport, you can sing, you can perform some task, or you're gifted in some area, it's because of God's grace. God's grace, his unmerited, his undeserved favor. God has shown me favor by giving me this ability. It is not to be looked at as, well, it's second class. It's, I can't really use that in the church. that doesn't really do anything. Well, maybe you can't use it. Maybe it's not something you can use in the middle of a church service, but maybe you can use that to encourage someone else or to challenge someone else. I had a dear friend for many, many years. I knew this woman since the time that I got saved. So I knew her for like 25, 26 years. She is now home in heaven. And she was a Sunday school teacher, yes, but she was a gifted artist. And I watched her for years in two different churches that we served at together. Her name was Abby. Tiny little old lady. She was so small. She was smaller than my mom, and my mom was small. And Abby was this little elderly lady who she was so crafty, and she would be involved with the VBSs every single year. Like the artwork, the craft that all the kids were going to be putting together, because there's always a bunch of crafts, for VBS. She would come up with those ideas and I saw her one year we had a racing theme that year. And she used a Twinkie and made a car out of it. So the kids would all get a Twinkie. Man, can you imagine how exciting that was? I love Twinkies. Anybody else love Twinkies? Yeah? Twinkies. Yeah. Anybody know what chocodiles are? Chocodiles?
What?
Chocodiles? They don't make them anymore. They were basically Twinkies covered in chocolate. De Dios. From God. Just like, oh, man. But who cares about that junk? Anyways, she took this Twinkie and she made a car out of it.
What?
So all the kids would get this Twinkie and then have all the little parts and they put this little car together. And then they'd take it apart and eat it. But it was craftiness. I never would have thought about that. You look at a Twinkie, it's like, no, these are for eating. But she was able to come up with that kind of stuff. She was a painter. I watched her several times paint murals in classrooms. Walk into the classroom and there's this huge life-size David and Goliath on there, and David's in the middle of about to fling the stone at Goliath's head, and then Goliath is like, ah! Incredible. I even saw that she there is on the on the 215 freeway heading through Riverside or Grand Terrace. There is a veterans hall there that her husband used to belong to, and on the side of a semi-trailer, she painted this huge mural of this eagle. It's incredible. She had the ability to do that. I did not. I don't have that ability. She did. And she used it to bless inside of the church, and she used it as a ministry outside of the church, and maybe you're gifted that way. It doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to be this stage. Maybe some other platform that God has given you. Now we move on to our second and final main division, which is the keeping of the Sabbaths. Let's find out why this is such a big deal. Verse 12, and the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak also to the children of Israel. Yikes, just lost my spot. There it is. And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak also to the children of Israel, saying, surely my Sabbaths you shall keep. Now let's stop for just a moment. What is a Sabbath? What is a Sabbath? Noah? A holy day. Okay, that's good. Yes, that is correct. Anybody else want to participate in that? Anybody know what the Sabbath is? What is it?
It's typically, as you said, a holy day on Saturday, in which isn't it designed for the Jews, in which they can't do anything or work? They have to just kind of observe it and use it to relax and rest.
Yes, and you said it was Saturday.
Yeah.
Right? It would begin on Friday night at sundown and go until Saturday night at sundown. That's their Sabbath. And as Nathan said, it's a day of rest. And as Noah said, it is a holy day. You're like, a holy day of rest? Yes. Isn't that incredible? God is so cool that way. I'm going to make you a day of rest, and it's going to be holy. Okay? And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak also to the children of Israel, saying, surely my Sabbaths you shall keep. For it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations. So he's about to tell them what the sign is, that you may know that I am the Lord who sanctifies you. Therefore, it is a sign of sanctification. Number one, this Sabbath is a sign of sanctification. Sanctification, I didn't cover this in first service. What exactly is sanctification? Does anybody know what sanctification is? That's this primarily a New Testament word, or at least we hear about it lots in the New Testament. What about it? What was sanctification? What do you think it is, Noah? Yes! Excellent. Ding, ding, ding. Winner, winner, chicken dinner. It is the process of someone becoming holy. And it's God that does the sanctifying. God is sanctifying each of us. He has sanctified us. He is sanctifying us. He will sanctify us. He's going to complete it all. So God says, listen, the Sabbath. Now, he's already told them about the Sabbath. You've got to take the last day of the week, and you need to rest. And he already told them, gave them the instructions on that. But now, as he's closing up his conversation with Moses, something in him seems to believe that this idea of the Sabbath is important enough that, hey, I need to tell these guys about this again, this day of rest. So in verses 14 down to the bottom, he gives them this solemn warning. Verse 14, you shall keep the Sabbath therefore, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it, you violate the Sabbath, you don't rest, check out how serious he is, shall surely be put to death. Like, wait a minute. You're telling me if I don't rest, you're going to kill me. That's what God is saying. He's telling Moses, listen, if someone violates the Sabbath, they don't rest, you got to kill that individual. That's serious. That's some serious rest. God is not playing. Yes?
Why would they be cut off from their people or be put to death if they worked? Like, isn't it like good to work?
It is good to work.
Why weren't they allowed to work on Sabbath though?
Okay? With it.
Because God said don't.
Because God said so.
Because God said so.
You know, like your parents, because I said so. You want to die? Do it or else. Because they were in danger of being productive. And we're about to read it right now. He's going to tell them, you need to be productive for 6 days a week. Be productive. But you got to reserve this one day. Rest. It's a day of holiness. Why was God so serious about it? He was serious about it because what would happen, and this ends up happening, what would happen is they would realize, well, we make money 6 days a week. There's another day in the week. We're not supposed to use it, but if we use it, we can make a little more money. And so they decide over the years, over the generations, to violate the Sabbath and to use it. And what ends up happening is I start scraping in the money and forgetting about God. It's produce, 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 produce. And life becomes all about producing things. And we forget about God, and we push God out. Yes?
Is there also a rule in the Sabbath that you can't purchase food?
Yes, yeah. And that pattern began with, remember they weren't supposed to work their fields or anything. It's like just leave, the seventh year. They had a Sabbath in their years also. So they weren't supposed to do anything, just rest. It's a good thing. I like rest. I like to stay busy, but I like to rest also. Listen.
Did they cook all their food on Friday? And then they would just bring it out on Saturday?
That's probably what they did. Yeah. And to feed yourself, I'm sure would not violate the Sabbath. Like you can't eat because you're working by lifting your hand or whatever. But they weren't supposed to go out and work their fields and all of that.
Didn't Jesus work on the Sabbath?
Did he? Did Jesus work on the Sabbath? He did something on the Sabbath. What did he do?
He healed the lame.
He did heal the lame. Yes, yeah, he did do that. And they accused him of working on the Sabbath. You're violating the Sabbath. They didn't care about the lame individual. They just cared about their Sabbath is being violated. Yes.
But Jesus replied, is it unlawful to heal on the Sabbath or something like that?
Right. Yeah, is it better for me to come back tomorrow and heal this guy? Like, why can't we just heal him now, a day early? There was also something, though, that Jesus got in trouble for on the Sabbath. Does anybody else remember what it was? Had something to do with eating. Buddy? Yes?
His disciples were eating with unwashed hands or something?
They were picking the grain off, remember that? And they were, what do you call it? The heads of grain. So there were times when Jesus would get in trouble for these different things, for so-called breaking the law, but God, those are not things those were not in violation of what God is doing here. What God wants them to do is to not forget about Him. You can work these 6 days, you got to produce, got to be productive. But give me this one day. And we know that every day for us, it should be a day spent with God. Whether we're working or not working, that we ought to spend it with God. Verse 14, you shall keep the Sabbath, therefore, for it is holy to you. Everyone who profanes it shall surely be put to death. For whoever does any work on it, that person shall be cut off from among his people. Work shall be done for 6 days, but the seventh is the Sabbath of rest, holy to the Lord. Whoever does any work on the Sabbath, he shall surely be put to death. You see the pattern there? Stay productive for 6 days, but take that seventh day to rest. Society can get that backwards oftentimes. I'm not looking at any of you because I know none of you would do this. But I know of some people who are like, oh my gosh, there's 2 weeks left of school. I better get started. I know none of you would do that, right? Like, amen, I would never do that. Some of you are like, there's 2 weeks left. I better get started. The pattern is use the time to work and be productive and work hard. But you got to have some time to rest, some time to spend with me. Verse 16, so very important. This is going to seem so odd at first, especially for us, but it's so very important. Therefore, the children of Israel shall keep the Sabbath, to observe the Sabbath throughout their generations as a perpetual covenant. Verse 17, It is a sign between me and the children of, help me out, Fusion, who? Israel. It is a sign between me and the children of who? Israel. Israel. That's another name. The children of Israel is another name for who? What are the people called? Somebody said it. Somebody said the Jews. Jews. You hear what God's saying here in verse 17? He says this is a sign between me and the Jews. You know that there are 9 of the 10 commandments that continue on into the New Testament that are applicable to the Christians, the Gentiles, not Jews, the Gentiles. There's one of them that is not commanded to the Gentiles. Does anybody want to take a guess as to which one it is?
Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy?
Yeah. That's the one that Christians are not commanded to follow. You say, what? Really? Why? Because God tells us why here in verse 17. He says in verse 17, it is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. Now, is it good to take a day of rest on Saturday? I got no problem with that. It's a good thing. There's nothing in the Bible that says I can't do that. But what about a day spent on God? You see, there are some individuals who say, you go to church on Sunday. There are people who would disagree with you and I being here right now. Because you know what Sunday is, right? It's a day to worship the sun god. And you're celebrating the sun god, and you ought not go to church on Sunday, and you should be there on Saturday because Saturday is the right day. And then we go, hey, Saturday's good. So was Friday for the home Bible study. But come to think of it, so was Thursday when I sit down with my family and we have a devotion together. But, actually, so is Wednesday because we get together at Fusion and we worship on Wednesday also. Tuesday's also a good day. Get together with my friends and we read or we study. But you know what? Actually, come to think of it, Monday's a good day too. In fact, every single day is a good day to spend with God. So it's not about one specific day, and yet there are individuals that you may or may not encounter in your lifetime that may say, wait, you're a Christian and you go to church on Sunday? Shame. But really, the day on which we go is not really the issue. But for us, we want to dedicate every day to God, and everything that I'm doing, whether it's a sport or my schooling or the instruments or the artistry or whatever it is, listen, it's all for you. Every day's for you, God. It's all about you. Here, God does set this day apart. It's specific. It is a sign between me and the children of Israel forever. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and on the 7th day he rested and was refreshed. And in verse 18, and when he had made an end of speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone, written with the finger of God. What? Gave him tablets, these stone tablets, where and on those things were written things with the finger of God. He wrote them himself. Can you imagine how much you could get for that on eBay? Incredible. Incredible. God finishes this segment here. Now, he's certainly not done with the children of Israel, and he's certainly not done with Moses. But he finishes this segment here by saying, okay, I want all of these things done, and here are the people that I want to do it. I've called them to do this. He didn't call Moses. He said, you go tell Bezalel, and you go tell Aholiab, I want them to do this. Moses, you don't do it. He even called Aaron and his sons. He said, I want them to be priests. Moses, I don't want you to do it. You do what you do. I'll get people to do this over here. But then he finishes this segment with this warning about the Sabbath. Now, what do you guys think? God's warning them again about the Sabbath. Why do you think he warns them before he closes it down? Why do you think God warns them one last time about the Sabbath specifically? What do you think, Noah? Yes, to get his point across, certainly. Do you think? Yes.
I was going to say so that they can be without excuse.
When?
When
Because
you're
that is correct.
judge.
Yes. Because were they going to dishonor the Sabbath? Yeah. Yeah, they would. They would. In fact, there would come a point in their future, in their history now as we look back, but at this point in their future, when they would not honor God in the Sabbath year. God had even appointed a Sabbath year for them, and they wouldn't do that. And God ends up taking all of those years back from them. He says, oh, you don't want to honor me? I'll send you into captivity. And they were gone from the land, and the land had rest, and God got back those years that they stole from him. He says, I'm giving you this as a gift. They said, we're just going to keep working. Forget that. There's money to be made. And so you and I must be careful. We must be careful. Matt, our worship leader, works, he does air conditioning, but not like air conditioning like on this building. I mean, he can do that because he knows everything. Is there anything Matt can't do? But he works on large machinery too. And he was telling me about one of these factories that he goes into that they make plastic bottles and things, for drinks and different things. And he said that the machine is just running 24/7, man, 365. And rarely do they ever shut it down. And when they do, it's for maintenance, and they shut it down. Hurry up, get it fixed, and get it back online, and boom, 24/7. There it goes. And that's the mentality, is just, you got to go. And you and I have got to be careful. That it's not all about go. And we forget about God. Money is great. It's good. But if we have the money and we forget about God, no bueno, right? Father,